I'm Colleen Sheehan. I teach at Villanova University, and I'm director of the Matthew J. Ryan Center for the Study of Free Institutions and the Public Good at Villanova. In fact, some of our students and student leaders from the Ryan Center are here today. And I'm also recently been nominated by Governor Corbett for the Pennsylvania State Board of Education, a public service I'm happy to do because I hope very much we can work for school choice and educational freedom. Our panel today is entitled Obama's Regulatory Overkill. Now, it seems to me that there are three types of political leaders. Basically, one, the panderer, secondly, the potentate, and third, the statesman. Now, the first, the panderer, we all know that type. He says whatever the people want to hear. He's a weather vane. He's surrounded by political consultants, by pollsters, by handlers. They tell him what to wear, what to say. They give him phrases that seem to resonate and work with the constituents. For example, more time, more money, imagination, peace of mind, no excuses, fight for the taxpayers. In other words, sound bites. Sound bites because it's all about victory. I'm reminded of that old movie where Robert Redford stars in it called The Candidate. And he's surrounded by handlers, and they tell him what to say, and lo and behold, they're right, and victory comes. And it's election day, the results are in, he wins. And Robert Redford stands there, quiet, almost paralyzed for a moment, and then looks at his handlers and says, "Now what?" Well, I think Fred Anton said it well yesterday when he said, we here are not just simply about winning. Of course we want to win, but we have to have a reason to win. It's not just elections and re-elections. It's what John Gizzi just said. It's about having principles and having a cause. Now, the potentate, he's in charge. He doesn't need all the handlers, but in fact, he doesn't really need the people. In fact, he really looks at the people oftentimes as a nuisance. He often has a crew around him of bureaucrats, of experts. This is the great bureaucratic leader. He's the Mr. Big Man know-it-all. Whereas the people, they're the unsophisticated, the yahoos. They're the type, like in Western Pennsylvania, who cling to their guns and their religion. And then finally, there's the statesman. This is the true leader. This is like a Lincoln, a Churchill, a Reagan. These are political leaders who respect the people and their liberties and their ultimate authority. But they know, too, that they are not and are not willing to be a weather vane, not only to talk in sound bites. They are there for a reason. And their reason has everything to do with a cause, and a cause that makes it worth being a citizen of a free republic. Today we're going to talk about the second type of leader, the potentate, the bureaucrat, because we live today more and more in what's been come to be known as the administrative state, the state that stifles us, takes away our rights, takes away our liberties, makes us dependent as if we were little children, and ultimately, in the end, if we're not careful, we will become slavish. And the worst part is we won't even know it. We will love to be given to be coddled, taken care of so much that even though we say we love liberty, we forget what it means. So on our panel today to talk about this is Ray Henderman from the Heritage Foundation, Christian Leinbach from Berks County, Nick Pandelides, Anna Puig, and Jennifer Stefano. And we are going to go in that order. Let me first introduce to you Ray Hederman, who is a research fellow and assistant director at the Heritage Foundation Center for Data Analysis. He's a frequent radio and TV guest, and he provides commentary on the labor market, taxes, health care, and the economy. Please welcome Ray Hederman.
Good morning, and thank you very much for allowing me to come up and flee from the stench of D.C. to come up and talk to people who are making a difference. You know, when our republic was founded, we had a very deliberate system of government with three branches. We had, the congressional or the legislative branch. We had the presidency or the executive branch, and we had the judicial branch. And this was a very deliberate form of government. As the Federalist Papers laid out, the idea was let ambition check ambition. The fabled checks and balances and separation of powers. But today we're witnessing the rise of the fourth branch of government, what we call the administrative state. And whatever we think of Congress, and most of us think very little, at least congressmen and women have to stand up to the American people at the end of the day. Whatever decisions they make in Congress, they are accountable at the ballot box. And when they make a decision that goes against the will of the American people, like Obamacare, they lose elections. Bureaucrats, on the other hand, do not have such accountability. They have the capacity to restrict our liberty, to make far-reaching decisions that impact our decisions of moral consequence, to restrict our employment opportunities, and harm our economic growth. And they never have to face the American people at the end of the day and explain why they made such decisions. Right now, we are seeing the administrative state at the peak of its powers. Never before have we seen such regulatory overreach coming from Washington, D.C., reaching into every aspect of American life. In the first 3 years of President Obama's administration, he has issued over 106 major rules with hundreds of millions of dollars of impact on each rule. This is 4 times the amount of major rules issued during the same period of time in President Bush's first 3 years. But that's not the end of it. President Obama's decision rules have impacted over $46 billion of costs. That's 5 times the fiscal impact of the same amount of rules in George Bush's first 3 years. And when you sit there and you make businesses pay billions of dollars more to comply with these new rules from Washington, this has a real world impact. And those people in the business sector can understand. And this isn't some crazy, conservative idea. There you go again, talking about the evils of regulation. The Federal Reserve Bank president of Atlanta goes out, he talks to businesses. And Dennis Larkhart reported back and he says, I've talked to many business owners, and they tell me they're not going to hire a single additional worker until they understand the consequences of the health care bill. And we know the administration is constantly changing the rules of the health care bill. And businesses are confused and they don't understand. And that's one of the reasons that we are seeing the smallest amount of small business creation in interim recovery. It's one of the reasons that coming out of this recession, the labor market has experienced the greatest slowdown, the slowest recovery since the Great Depression. And it's not just members of the Federal Reserve Board. Listen to President Obama's appointed chief of his competitiveness council, Jeffrey Immelt, the head of GE. He says, GE has the lobbyists, we have the money, we have the resources to understand regulations. Small businesses don't. And that's why regulations is the second biggest concern in multiple small business surveys, because they're having a hard time understanding the rules of Washington. And that's partially because this administration changes the rules. It's like, when I watch my children play games, and the older son somehow always wins because whenever he's in danger of losing, he changes the rules. And so, if you're in an administration, if you're in a business that this administration likes, if you're in a union-heavy industry, if you're in a green jobs, you'll have the National Labor Relations Board change the rules to help you out. They'll restrict your competitors. They'll give you better loans, better offers. But if you're in a business that this administration does not like, woe be unto you. Because this administration can change the rules of the game, even that you thought business ideas and agreements were settled, you can find the rug pulled out from underneath you. Another Federal Reserve president commented on this Jeffrey Lackard in Richmond, he said, you know what? The administration came and they withdrew wholesale coal permits from the state of West Virginia. Permits that had previously been issued. Businesses thought they had to go ahead and the administration changed the rules. And Jeffrey Lackard said there's no doubt that this has a chilling effect on business investment and hiring. So we take a look and we understand why our unemployment rate has been lagging. We point to decisions that this administration has been made. And we can go down the laundry list from Keystone to Dodd-Frank to Obamacare to many other EPA regulations that have raised billions of dollars of cost and made businesses confused about how to play the game. So there are some solutions. And at Heritage, we've come up with a couple of ideas. First, we say Congress should fulfill their job and vote on major legislative impact. Make congressmen accountable instead of faceless bureaucrats. The second thing is regulations should have a sunset period. So they end at the end of 10, 20 years, then we can go back and revisit them. And thank you. And so at the end of these days, these regulations have a real impact. They reduce employment, they reduce wages, they make people make decisions they would not ordinarily face. And for more information on regulations, Heritage has a great new report called Red Tape Rising. And so with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray. Next at bat, we have Christian Leinbach, who is County Commissioner in Berks County. He's also Vice President of the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania and also Vice President of the National Association of Counties Northeast. He's a true public servant.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be able to be here this morning. I too am going to reference the EPA and the impacts that we see in Berks County, but I want to start by making something very clear. As an individual who believes that God created the heavens and the earth, I do believe there's a responsibility that I have and that we have as individuals to take care of God's creation. So what I'm talking about is not no regulation. What I'm talking about is regulation based on science and common sense. First of all, we have the case of two battery companies in Berks County. One is the Exide Corporation, the other is East Penn Manufacturing. About a year and a half ago, a new lead air standard went into place by the EPA. East Penn Manufacturing was already meeting that new standard and had been meeting that standard for a year and a half. Exide was barely meeting the old standard. These two companies have a reputation. East Penn is a locally owned company and consistently has been ahead of the curve investing in environmental protections to run a solid organization since 1948. Exide, on the other hand, is probably the number one company that I receive complaints about. However, in the end, there was an arbitrary rule by the EPA that required 3 years of history proving that you were meeting a standard, even though the standard wasn't even in place. East Penn Manufacturing had a year and a half of stats. Those stats were documented by the DEP. But even with that information, the EPA came in and declared Lyons, Maxatawny, Kutztown area, the northeast part of Berks County, a lead non-attainment area, which restricted the business expansion of East Penn Manufacturing and any other type of manufacturing in that area. Now, they did the same thing with Exide and the Laureldale area outside of Reading. I agreed with that, but I made this claim to DEP and the EPA. What are you saying to businesses that are doing the right thing when you treat them the same way as a business who isn't doing the right thing? That's one example. We're a year and a half later, and I can tell you that East Penn has 3 years now of records, and the lead non-attainment is going to be withdrawn. Last fall, we were approached by GenOn. GenOn is an owner of a number of large electric generation facilities, many of which are coal. We have one of those in Reading called Titus Station. It's a 243 megawatt facility, which puts it on the small side. The new NOx standards being put in place by the Obama administration, effective April 2015, are about one thing and one thing only. They're not about science. They are an extreme jump from where we are to where they want to go, April 2015, and they are not about common sense. If you read what the leaders in the Energy Department are saying and what Obama's own leaders have said, it is about shutting down coal-fired electrical generation. And that is insane. As of December of 2011, Electric Power Monthly, here is where we get our electricity. 39% of all electricity in America is generated by coal. That's where the Prius comment came from California. 39%. 26%, and this is rising, is generated from natural gas. 22% is generated from nuclear. 7% hydroelectric, and 6% renewable. We need to know that the Obama administration wants to shut down coal, and if they're honest, they feel the same way about gas. Well, guess what? That represents over 60% of all of our electrical generation. We need to get back to common sense, and we need to start doing it in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Speaking of fuel and gas, did you know that Obama has a 999 program? $9.99 per gallon. Next we're fortunate to have Nick Pandalidis. Dr. Pandalidis has been in medical practice for over 20 years. He is also founder of Docs for Patient Care, a national physician advocacy group launched to oppose, and I'm going to try to say this because I never actually say it this way, the passage of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, AKA, of course, Obamacare. Dr. Pandalidis.
Good morning, and thanks very much for inviting me to speak to you today. I became engaged in the grassroots movement, not as a physician, but like many of you, as a father and an uncle who believe in the goodness of traditional America. I'm here today representing the Pennsylvania Coalition for Responsible Government and the Docs for Patient Care. Docs for Patient Care is an organization of physicians that came together in the aftermath of the AMA endorsing Obamacare. Our short-term mission is to repeal Obamacare and to pass market-based reforms that will truly lower costs and improve access. The long-term goal for Docs for Patient Care is to supplant the AMA and be an organization that truly represents the interests of physicians, patients, and American health care. Obamacare is a fiscal, a health care, and a freedom disaster. Governor Corbett, with the approval of many of the Republican legislators, plan to go ahead with implementing an Obamacare-compliant exchange. They rightly say they need to be prepared for the possibility that the Supreme Court will not find Obamacare unconstitutional. They further say that if the state does not set up the exchange, the federal government will. And then they claim that the state running the exchange actually will be less harmful than the federal government. The simple truth is that the structure and the operation of the exchange is dictated by federal legislation and federal regulation. None of the harmful effects of Obamacare are ameliorated by the state running it. Implementing a compliant exchange enacts Obamacare in Pennsylvania. If you go to the website of the Pennsylvania Insurance Department, you will see that the exchange will enforce the individual mandate. They will send citizens' financial records, information, to the IRS and to the Department of the Treasury, and they will dole out billions of dollars of new federal deficit entitlement spending. It is hard to understand how Tom Corbett, as the Attorney General, who initiated Pennsylvania's lawsuit against Obamacare that now awaits the federal Supreme Court's ruling, is going ahead with a policy that effectively enacts Obamacare in Pennsylvania. Establishing the exchange will cost taxpayers millions of dollars. It implements a new bureaucracy with all the associated ongoing costs that taxpayers cannot afford. What is the proper action for the governor and the legislature to take to protect the citizens from Obamacare? First, they need to reject setting up the exchange and send back any federal seed money to establish the exchange. They should pass legislation that prohibits any individual or employer from being forced to buy insurance and protects their ability to purchase services that they desire on their own. They should proactively pass legislation that will promote insurance security, affordability, and access to the poor to health care to the poor. Those legislations would include opening sales across state lines, lowering the number of mandated coverages to give consumers more choice and lower cost. Legislation that would provide for review of insurance company recession of policies, and lastly, convert Medicaid to a premium support program so that the poor could truly access high-quality care. The governor and the legislature will take the wrong action if citizens don't get involved. Please stop by the PA Coalition for Responsible Government desk for more information, including a link to a petition that will allow you that encourages the governor and the assembly to pass legislation to stop Obamacare in Pennsylvania and to promote health care legislation that will truly lower costs and improve access. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. And I thank Dr. Pendelides, too, for coming dressed for the occasion. The next two people on tap are Tea Party folks, but I couldn't persuade them to dress quite so appropriately for the occasion. We have next at bat Anna Puig, who is a leader in the Tea Party movement, as well as co-chair of the Kitchen Table Patriots. Anna served on Governor Corbett's transition team most recently, and now she is with Freedom Works Pennsylvania State Director. Please welcome Anna Puig.
Thank you. So I know a lot of you in the room and you're sick and tired of hearing my story, but here it is again, because I think it's the most effective way to make Americans understand what's at stake here. I'm so humbled to be here today. When I was a little girl growing up, never in a million years did I think that I'd be able to address a crowd like this in English, because I didn't learn English until I was about 15 years old. So I am an American by choice. I was born and raised in Brazil, and I moved here when I was 15 with my family. My dad was a visionary, and he understood what was at stake in Latin America. He traveled frequently to the United States, and one day he said to my mom, "Enough is enough. We're moving the kids to the United States." So he got a job here. It wasn't a high-paying job, and we sold everything in Brazil. And we came with 8 suitcases, and we started all over again. And it wasn't easy, but we worked hard because we came for the American dream, and that's life, liberty, opportunity, and the pursuit of happiness. So with that, I had to put myself through college. I went to Baylor University, and it wasn't easy. I had to work jobs that I didn't want to work, but it paid off in the end because I graduated with no debt. I worked at Domino's Pizza, answering the phone. "Thank you for calling Domino's Pizza. May I help you?" I smelled like pizza every night when I went back to my dorm room. My roommates hated me. I worked for Toyota Motor Credit, answering the phones, and as a collections agent. I worked in a gym daycare with a bunch of snotty kids. At the time, I didn't like kids. Now I have 4, and I love them. So anyway, so I did what Americans do. I worked hard to become somebody, and I became somebody, and I had choices in my life, and I've done well for myself. And now I have a paying job in the grassroots movement, and I'm proud to say that I have a paying job in the grassroots movement. And I'm striving to become that 1% that has been put down over and over again by the occupiers and by the Obama administration, by all his cronies. And hopefully someday I'll be proud to stand here and tell you that I'm that 1% now. So with that, I've seen enough in my lifetime. I've lived in England. I delivered a child under the national healthcare system. I can tell you it does not work. You know, it was an atrocity when I delivered my third son there in England. And, you know, the nurses put him on top of me after he came out, sorry to be graphic. And, you know, they left because guess what? Their shift was done and there wasn't another nurse to replace them. So, you know, or when I used to go for my monthly exams when I was pregnant, and they gave me a little jar, and I looked at the doctor and I said, "What's this jar for?" And they said, "Well, that's for you to collect your urine every month, but you have to take it home and wash it and bring it back for us, because we can't afford, you know, to give you a different jar every time you come here once a month." Or when my second son's eardrums kept on bursting in England, and, you know, the doctor kept on telling me, "I can't give you antibiotics, it will just heal itself, don't worry about it." So those are the things that Americans, unfortunately, you know, take for granted, because through no fault of your own, most Americans have never been outside the borders of the United States. And they can't compare what we have here, which is the greatest system in the world, to what's out there. There is no better country. Even under Barack Obama, there is still no better country than the United States. And there is no other place for us to go to. So we have to fight to preserve our freedoms right now. We cannot allow this president, first of all, to win a second term, because then we will be done. But we have to unite, because divided we will fall. But together, I think we still stand the chance to bring America back to what it used to be. We can't allow this president to continue to so aggressively regulate our businesses, our small businesses, the people who create the jobs, those jobs that I just told you about at the Domino's Pizza. Those people are going out of business. I have a friend in Bucks County where I live, and he heard I was going to be in this panel, and he called me up and he said, "Anna, tell my story." He runs a manufacturing business in Bucks County, and he got a call from OSHA the other day, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and this was about a year ago. And OSHA, he didn't get a call. OSHA came into his office and said, "We have to look at your facility." And they went through it, didn't ask for permission, they didn't have a warrant, they didn't have anything. They just came in, they took a whole day of his time, and then they fined him $20,000 because he had some bottles of water that weren't properly labeled. So he fought it back. In the end, he had to pay $8,000. He fired 2 employees this year, and he told his crew, he said, "OSHA's gonna come back in because these employees are gonna call OSHA, the guys that were committing fraud, time card fraud, they're gonna call OSHA and they're gonna come back in and check on us." And sure enough, OSHA called this time and he said, "You know what? Don't come after me. You're gonna need a warrant to come into my business." And that, my friends, is what we need to do. We need to be the William Marshes of the world. Because if we don't say enough is enough, this government intrusion is never going to end. And I will finish with this. This week, the Supreme Court will start hearing the case of Obamacare. And I pray to God every day that this will be found unconstitutional. Because if not, we will be up a creek without a paddle. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think sometimes those who come to America and adopt this country just as this country adopts them refresh our own spirit by showing us the spiritedness of what it means to be a new citizen, almost once again in a new land, like at the time of the founding. And I think probably that's where the Tea Party gets some of its inspiration as well. And next we have another member of the Tea Party, Jennifer Stefano, who is the State Director of Americans for Prosperity. She's also a regular guest on Fox Business News and Fox News. She founded the Conservative Leadership Coalition, which later became the Loyal Opposition. And in 2004, she earned an Emmy nomination for outstanding reporting. And I also want to mention that she's a wildcat, Mr. Anton. She's a Villanova alum. Welcome, Jennifer Stefano.
Thank you. I'm here today to talk about a very, very important issue that is affecting many, many Americans. It's a problem sweeping the nation that I think we are not all aware of, and that is whale blubber and pregnant women. Are you all aware of this epidemic? Well, I have to tell you about it because it's something that clearly has concerned the Environmental Protection Agency and our president. A very non-scientific study was done on a group of women living on the Faroe Islands, and they found that those women who eat a high level of whale meat and whale blubber, when pregnant, have high levels of mercury in their blood, and therefore it is unhealthy. So the EPA and the president thought, wow, that sounds like something we can use to shut down coal plants. And here's how they did it. They took this non-scientific study and they issued a ruling based on it, in which it said that the EPA recently published its regulation which seeks to lower mercury emissions from coal and oil fire plants, just based on this one study. Now, here's the problem with that. The EPA admits it is the most expensive regulation ever put out by the federal government. $11 billion a year, that's the EPA's estimate. Independent organizations say it's even higher. Let me tell you what this is going to cost the United States of America. It is going to cost us inordinately, not just in paying for this, in paying for new federal bureaucrats, which every federal bureaucrat, one hired federal bureaucrat, costs 98 private sector jobs. There are estimates that 59,000 people, 59,000 of us, could be out of work because of this. But the president, and you can find the president on YouTube saying this, he boasts. He's proud of this. He loves this. In fact, and this is his quote, he wants to saddle coal plant operators with so many new costly regulations that, quote, President of the United States, it will necessarily bankrupt them. You know, I'm all for competition, but when the United States government is the one putting its foot on the neck of working men and women and shoving their face in the dirt and the pain of unemployment, and they are the ones that are competing with us, we have risen to a new level of unacceptability that should make every one of us take to the street, door knocking, phone banking, calling, to make sure we're educating people. You know, I live in Philadelphia, and I love picking people up from the airport because we drive by the refineries, and everyone always complains, oh, they're so ugly. Ugly. I smell that beautiful gas. It's a beautiful thing. I am not washing clothes in a river because of those refineries, because of these coal plants. Thank you. Thank you, and front-end loading washing machines. That saved women. These are, and yet, 2 weeks ago, refinery workers in Marcus Hook collected their last paycheck. 500 of them walked through the doors of their home with their last paycheck in their hand. You want a war on women? Coal regulations, mercury regulations, shutting down plants, the president raging war, there's your war on women. Right there, Mr. President. And the commander-in-chief, he's presiding over it. I go to fill my minivan, women, single mothers, we all go to fill our minivan, there's your war on women. You try to go buy food, you stretch every penny, there's your war on women. The war is coming out of the regulatory environment. You remember the president, he tried to get cap and trade, right? He tried to get cap and trade, he couldn't get it. He said, well, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So these regulations, he's shutting down the refineries. Sunoco just announced they're going to shut down 2 more. They're going to idle more families. I have suffered the pain of unemployment. I know the feeling of walking in the door, of all these Americans, these men and women walking through the door and having to tell their spouse, their children, that they don't have a job anymore. That, I could give you a million statistics. I could talk to you endlessly. But I'm telling you, there is no greater pain than having that knot in your stomach when you go in and you tell your spouse or your loved ones, your family, that you are unemployed. And you say it's going to be all right, but I know so many Americans are now saying to themselves, this time it may not be all right. The president is not skinning a cat. He is fleecing the American workers. There is a war on women, and this is what it is. It's a war on women, it's a war on men, it's a war on family, the President of the United States, through regulatory overreach, has not only overstepped the bounds of the Constitution, he has unleashed economic hell on all of us. And we in Pennsylvania have so much to lose with our beautiful natural resources. No one speaks about it better than Ann McElhenney. So I urge you, that when they come at you and say there's a war on women and you don't like the environment and you don't like the children, don't give them a fact. When they come at you with that and take swings at you, swing back and hard. We can do it. Thank you.
Don't mess with conservative women. Well, I asked everybody on the panel that if they would really try to keep the time limit, and I would remind them if I had to, but I was thinking, well, perhaps we could govern ourselves, and we did so well that we have all the time that Loman asked us for questions, because I was really hoping that we would, so that we can all chat together and discuss these issues, shake it up a little bit. So, are there any questions? And while I wait, I was just thinking when I was listening to the Tea Party folks talking about bureaucracy that a long time ago, the young people here won't remember this, but Ronald Reagan gave a speech at Moscow State University in which he said, the primary barrier to liberty is bureaucracy. The number one barrier, he said, to liberty is democracy. And he said, let me tell you a story. This is set in a town. The town could be anywhere. In other words, he was saying, I know you have this problem in Russia, but we really have this problem in America too. So this was happening already in the 80s. He said, this elderly woman goes to this bureaucrat, and she says, you know, in my town, we have a legend that when a baby is born, an angel comes down and kisses it. And wherever the angel kisses it, tells you something about what that child will grow up to be. So if the baby is kissed on the hand, he becomes a handyman. If he's kissed on the forehead, he becomes very bright and clever. Now you, sir, I'm just wondering where that angel kissed you that you would sit there all day long and do nothing. Are there any questions? Well, let me exercise the prerogative of the chair then and ask the panelists. We heard various versions of the problem of overregulation, of bureaucracy, of the administrative state. How do we get the... Thank you, Ray. The Heritage folks are so practical. Is there anything that ties together these different concerns that everyone has? There's overregulation in medicine, overregulation in some environmental concerns, overregulation in all the ways that you talked about. Is there a thread that ties these things together? Is there a method in Obama's madness as you see it?
I think the method in the madness here is that he wants all of us to be equal, and he wants all of us to suffer equally. And the time has come for us to rise up and rebel and say, no more, we're gonna fight this back. So I just wanna leave you with one thought that I should have included while I was up there, which is, don't walk away from here and go home and think that we have this in the bag in November, because I'm really worried about it and I don't think we do. And you heard Frank Luntz last night, and he doesn't think we do either. So go home, pick the candidate that you want to work for, stomp the ground for those candidates, and do what you can to turn this country around in the next 6 months, because there's not going to be a country left. I urge you, from my own experience, there will not be a country left after November. If he's done this much in 3 years, imagine what he's going to do when he's not faced with re-election. He will finish with the United States of America.
Christian.
I have a little bit different perspective. I will tell you that on the environmental side, I think that Obama, one, actually believes what he's doing relative to coal, natural gas. I believe he believes what the environmentalists have said, that this is dangerous, that this is harmful, that it's going to kill people. I will tell you, as a county commissioner, when I've gone and testified before the DEP and the EPA hearings in our community on the issues I just talked about, environmentalists are there, but there's nobody there from the conservative side. We as conservatives, one, need to start digging in and getting the facts about the environment. Don't deal with supposition. The other side does that all the time. Get the facts, and then have the courage to stand up in your local community, even if it means standing in front of a camera, and say what needs to be said. I've done that, but we need, as elected officials, to hear from people in our community that believe like we do, because it's a very limited group of people that are standing up for common sense and science and environmental regulation.
Thank you, Christian. A couple questions I'm going to combine for the doctor. What's the percentage of Pennsylvania doctors involved in political networking, number one? And number two, what is the best way to fight medical exchange?
Well, interesting. Doctors are, it's been very hard to get them engaged in the process. Our lives have become busier and busier trying to conform with all the different regulations that come down. And it's been disappointing how hard it's been talking to people to get them engaged. So it's a small percentage, but I think more and more are understanding that doctors are in a position to really influence healthcare reform in a good way, because we're in the midst of it and we understand how it works. We're seen as experts, and we're trusted by our patients. And that's exactly what Doctors for Patient Care is doing. We're going down to Washington, talking on behalf of our patients. We're not asking for any special dispensation. We're there saying, let us help you do the right thing, because we understand it better. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't address the second part of your question. So,
P.S.
P.S., sorry. Yeah, the best way is to learn more about it, and please stop by the booth. We'll give you more information. And from there, please go on and let your legislators know that you understand this, that establishing an exchange is not the proper way to protect the citizens of the Commonwealth from the evils of Obamacare. So leave me your name, whatever you need, we'll get you the information.
I see the Honorable Phil English taking notes. Christian, what are you doing in Berks County to fight back against federal regulations and mandates?
Well, first of all, we have, at least I have, taken the opportunity to visit all of the facilities. When I talked about facts, I wasn't going to make a determination about a plant or an operation without going to that facility, looking at what they're doing, talking to the management, and then when I had the facts, taking the opportunity. The DEP hearings and the EPA hearings are public hearings. They're covered by the local media. And I've taken the opportunity to testify, and I've asked others to do that. And I would add, I use social media to promote it. When I did these tours, I let people know where I was, what I was doing, and what I was finding out, good or bad. But that's the big area. The second area that I've not been able to get a second vote among our county commissioners, I believe there's one way to fight back when mandates are handed down. And that is, we need county governments willing to take the state or the federal government to court. We have to say we're not going to do it anymore. Mandate issues are about as popular as property tax elimination, and I'm tired of going through decades of nothing changing, and it won't change until we start suing. Enough counties start suing the regulatory agencies based on fact, and they will back off.
Thank you, Christian. Okay, I think this is for the panel in general, so we'll see if someone wants to answer this. Hans Morgenthau once said that the most dangerous word in the English language is the word, quote, precedent. Please pinpoint exactly what you consider to be the most dangerous precedent that Obama will leave to the liberals who will undoubtedly be around 10 years from now.
Can I quickly? You know, I think that's a great question, because when then Senator Obama was running for president, you'll remember one of his big campaign points was how President Bush overstepped the bounds of the presidency. He expanded executive power, and I'm going to change that. Do you remember that was one of his big campaigns? So President Obama is now in the office. How many of the executive powers that President Bush allotted to the presidency did President Obama roll back? How many? None. Not one. He didn't roll back one. In fact, what did he do? What's this whole panel about? He took those powers and then expanded them beyond what President Bush could ever dream of. And this is what we are setting up, is that too often when our guy does something or the other guy does something that we don't like, we stamp our foot and we scream and we yell. But then when our guy gets in and he does the same thing, we say nothing. See, and it's the same problem on both sides. The problem with Democrats, the problem with Republicans. We get very tied to parties and politicians. Well, here's the most important thing. We should be tied to our principles. Hold them all equally accountable. One man did not get us here. One man ain't gonna save us. Keep that in mind. And, well, maybe one woman will, but no, maybe one woman will. And I cannot emphasize that to you enough. It is not about party or politician. It is about principle. They have to respect the Constitution. They have to respect us. You want them accountable to you to do something. And that is the precedent President Obama's leaving us, and one which we should end once and for all.
Thank you. Ray, do you have something to say on that?
I think there are two things, this president's done that are pretty amazing. I think the first thing is that he realized that if you don't have the votes in Congress, you can't, pass something through Congress, pass it through a regulatory order. And the idea is try to bypass the will of the people. And he's done this in a variety of different policies. Some of the ideas of labor relations and our card check a few years ago, they couldn't make it through Congress because they were so unpopular. So instead, he's using the National Labor Relations Board to pass many of the things that were in there that would have been defeated by congressional vote. And so it's a way to sidestep the will of the people through the administrative state. So that's one thing I think liberals will look at and say, aha. The second thing is the idea is that you just pass a huge piece of legislation like Obamacare and don't have details. And then you use your regulators to come in and fill in the details. So if you take a look, people try to figure out how's Obamacare going to affect you. You don't know until bureaucrats and the Secretary of Sebelius tells you how the rules are going to affect you. And that's why you look at, what's going to be covered by premiums, what's going to be the health benefits. These constantly keep changing as administration adds new mandates depending on what their political preference of the day is. So these massive, huge vehicles of legislation, which are kind of sketched out in a liberal framework, where the details are then filled in by unelectable bureaucrats.
Thank you, Ray. We have a concerned citizen here who's passed along some information and wants to know if we're familiar with any of this. Do we know that the people of Pennsylvania, or do the people of Pennsylvania know of Act 129 that was passed in '08 to mandate energy conservation and to install smart meters to control all of us and our usage and back fines? Does anyone know about that? So, why, not just the panelists, but all of you here who are as much participants in this event as anyone who stands up here, why do you care about overregulation? Is it overregulation in your view? Is there too much bureaucracy? If so, what is the fundamental problem with that? Is it because there's a smart meter? Or is there something more going on that is making you maybe uncomfortable, maybe frustrated? Do you think that it's somehow undermining the very things that this country stands for? Why? It what? It's an attack on freedom and on the future freedom of your children. How? Ray or Jen?
I think it's the road to mediocrity in this country. It really is. I mean, we are a nation that people flock over here because it's the land of opportunity. It's the land where you can make of yourself anything. You can make anything of yourself. And, by all these rules and regulations, what's the incentive that we have as small business owners to continue to create jobs if we're going to be taxed to death and we're not going to be able to really make any money anymore? So at the end of the day, business is shutting down. We're all gonna just, put in enough time just to get by, and we will become mediocre. And I see it in the generations coming behind mine. I see it in my daughter's generation. If it wasn't for the fact that I sit with her on every single day, and I educate it on what's going on and what we have at stake here, she would just be completely brainwashed by the school system that she's in.
So, Anna, are you saying you don't need somebody else to tell you how to live every moment in your life, that you're capable, that you, in fact, are capable of governing yourself?
I am a woman, and I roar, so.
Christian?
Yeah, the question was asked, what's the most serious thing Obama's done? I think it's been a tag team. And it's the idea that government knows best, because in 2008, a Republican president with a Republican Secretary of Treasury said there are companies that are too big to fail, and the United States government is going to bail out the economy. We threw in the towel on free markets, and all that Obama did was affirm what the Republican leadership did in the prior administration and made it even worse.